Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Center for Audit Quality's Profession in Focus. My name is Julie Bell Lindsay, and I am the Executive Director of the Center for Audit Quality. I am very pleased to welcome today Sagar Teotia, who is the Chief Accountant of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Sagar, welcome.
Thank you, Julie. Delighted to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Before we get started, do you want to provide your standard disclaimer?
Sure, thank you. So these are my remarks. These aren't the remarks of anybody else in OCA, any of the other commissioners, or any of the commissions. So I speak for myself today.
Great. Well, let's dive right in. Early on in the pandemic, the SEC, including the Office of Chief Accountant, was very proactive in communicating and providing guidance to public companies around the issues arising from the pandemic. Can you provide us a summary of some of the specific actions that the Commission, including the Office of Chief Accountant, have taken?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. And so we've tried to be and will continue to be very proactive in terms of communications, whether it's statements, consultations, engagement. That's the heart of what we're trying to do in OCA and the SEC. You know, one example from an SEC point of view is way back when it feels like COVID-19 started, we started the COVID-19 webpage. Obviously now some time has passed and you can see how many different things are on there. And the thing to me that's always kind of interesting to see is the breadth of different divisions and offices, commission actions that kind of span that. And it's amazing when our building coordinates, works together. We have very close relationships and the different skills that operate to all kind of share our goal of protecting investors. And of course, OCA, I'd hope somebody would say pre-COVID-19, but certainly hopefully now has continued to be proactive, you know, and so, you know, we're you know, issuing statements, giving speeches is culturally part of what we want to do. We want to be helpful. We try to be timely with what we're seeing, with ultimately the goal of, hey, how can we pass along and share so we can get to the best financial reporting outcome for investors. So I'd say at a very high level, you know, kind of all of the internal things we've done on COVID-19 combined with OCA's kind of engagement with everybody, which we'll talk a lot about today, has kind of been how we've responded to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Great. As a result of the pandemic, it's unquestionable there's been a lot of economic uncertainty, and that uncertainty has made it, you know, very difficult for management and for companies to really provide a lot of estimates when it comes to financial reporting. Can you talk about, in your view, how companies can balance the need to provide good information to investors with all of this uncertainty that the pandemic has resulted in?
Sure, and you know, judgments, making challenging accounting decisions, right? That's not foreign to the profession. The profession has done an excellent job in the past, kind of working through that to get to high quality information. And so we've had a long-standing consultation process. We welcome consultations. People can see what we object to, what we don't object to. We frequently post those consultations so people know. Of course, you know, we've long stated well-reasoned, reasonable judgments we will accept. We've been saying that for a long time now. We will continue to apply that perspective. And obviously, you know, that means getting a full detail of your accounting question, getting all of the facts, digging into all of the accounting alternatives, discussing the issue with the auditors, with your audit committee. And then if you make kind of a well-reasoned judgment that's documented, you know, we've consistently not objected to those types of areas. And so we've certainly had examples in the past, right? We've all lived through the revenue standard, and there's numerous other standards, right? There's leases, CECL, CAMs, all have judgment. On the revenue standard, we try to put a lot of speeches out, and people, I think, had a sense of what we'd accept and not accept. And so while different than revenue, certainly, I think COVID-19 and what people have done and in Q1 and what we'll be doing here very shortly for Q2 for calendar companies is work through those judgments. So obviously, you know, there's a different environment, and we've been sensitive to that, and we've been mindful of that. But the underlying concepts of what I've outlined aren't, and we were able to see companies in Q1 make those high quality judgments that get investors high quality information that complies with GAAP. We're here for consultation, and of course we, you know, we have every reason to believe in Q2 companies will consider that. So Julie, I think that's how we've kind of, you know, tried to get the best reporting for investors.
There's two other issues relating to COVID and the risks related to COVID that I wanted to touch on just briefly. The first is going concern, or a company's ability to stay in business. And the second has to do with internal controls over financial reporting. In particular, you know, management has likely had to make some changes to their internal controls, going from a complete to a complete remote or virtual environment. Can you share your thoughts on each of these topics?
Sure, both great topics we're happy to discuss and have of course discussed. So going concern, FASB wrote an accounting standard. That standard was vetted through due process, was understood, is a good accounting standard, right? And so people are going through that. Depending on your facts and circumstances, you could be in a situation where you have disclosure requirements. Those disclosure requirements are very important for investors, and so you know, from our lens, you know, going concern, one of, you know, several very important issues, high quality GAAP there. People need to follow it, and of course, where you land, there can be different scenarios where you land will drive potentially different disclosures, and those are the disclosures that are really important. In terms of ICFR, another great topic. Look, we've long said ICFR. We've long emphasized ICFR for the importance it is to high quality financial reporting. As you've noted, Julie, you know, people have shifted from, you know, from an office to a telework in many cases, and naturally that might lead to different processes and so forth. Of course, businesses are potentially facing different risks. They may have, you know, put in new controls and so forth, right, depending on the company. And so how we view this is the same that we've held for a very long time. There's longstanding disclosure requirements that, to the extent any change materially affects or reasonably likely to materially affect an entity's ICFR, such changes need to be disclosed. And so those are two, actually, I think, great examples of how we try to look at two of, you know, maybe a very big number of different areas, but at least, Julie, that's kind of the reaction to those two questions.
Great, thanks. Let's shift gears a little bit now. With all the, you know, uncertainties, complexities, and risks that we've been talking about, can you talk about the audit committee oversight role? I know this is an area that you and other senior leaders at the commission have talked about quite a bit in the past. How, in your view, has the pandemic impacted these oversight responsibilities?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Great. Glad we get to talk about audit committees. And so, yeah, you're spot on. We've had a long history of discussion with audit committees, and we in OCA actively engage with audit committees. Of course, others in the commission do as well. We issued a statement. Boy, it seems like a long time ago, but really, I guess it wasn't that long ago. December, kind of emphasizing audit committees and certain things for them to think about as part of year-end financial reporting. And so we continue to be very engaged with audit committees. Want to understand their discussions with auditors. We want to understand what they're seeing. We want to pass along with what we're seeing. We've said many times in different contexts that audit committees, if you look at Sarbanes-Oxley, of all the different things that came out of it, are one of the most cost-effective, significant improvements to financial reporting. So just like we spend lots of time with preparers, lots of time with auditors, certainly audit committees are, of course, high on that list, all with the shared goal of getting the best financial reporting. And so no doubt it will continue to be foundational to certainly us and OCA.
Great. I know another area that the Office of Chief Accountant has been heavily involved in is kind of international financial reporting matters. Can you talk about some of the key areas or topics that you've been focused on the international stage, and why that is so important for financial reporting and relevant for financial reporting back here in the U.S.?
Sure. No, thanks for asking. And certainly the last piece too, I want to kind of hit on that piece of how it ties back in. But as people who know our office well know and really know the agency, we are very connected internationally, whether it's different regulators, different organizations, whether it's IOSCO, we play a leading role on IOSCO C1. I'm fortunate enough to be the co-chair of the monitoring group, which I'll talk about in a second. And then, of course, we spend lots of time on monitoring board and other items. So obviously, the world is global, and investors have interest in different parts of the globe. And so what's important to us is understand what other regulators are seeing, so we can make sure we have their perspectives. Do we always agree with it? Of course not. But is it important to know? Absolutely. It's absolutely critical. It helps us inform what we want to do domestically, whether it's whether it's working with the FASB, whether it's working with the PCAOB, whether it's working on a IOSCO project. Good example is IOSCO recently issued a statement on financial reporting. And we in the U.S., because Q1 and the timing of COVID-19 had gone through all of the things that we had talked about earlier, Julie, in terms of the reporting and all of the engagement and discussions we had. And so that allowed us in our role as on C1, one of many on C1, but on C1, to share our perspectives and so forth. And we feel like the IOSCO statement, it's similar, if you look at it, to some of our statements and our messaging in terms of the different areas it emphasizes and focuses on. And I think that was important that we were able to engage globally on that. So that's just one of many different examples of how it can kind of link back. In terms of the monitoring group, that's really important because ultimately the structure of the IAASB and kind of the PIOB and how the monitoring group will work and different roles and responsibilities has been something that's been worked on for a number of years now. We're making very significant progress, and the work has been continuing apace during COVID-19. And I think we'll continue to be able to move that significantly forward with the hope that, look, bottom line is hopefully that will improve those audits. And so, those are just a few of the examples of kind of the importance of international. And then obviously from a chair perspective, obviously IOSCO is absolutely critical from a commission, and our chairman spent a significant amount of time, on different important matters on that. So that, Julie, in a very short answer, I could go on for a long time about it because it's essential to what we're trying to do. It is kind of why it's so important to us.
Yes, and I think the IOSCO example that you mentioned is a great example, because I can tell you that a lot of the member firms here at the Center for Audit Quality really appreciate the global consistency of the messaging that were coming out of the securities regulator. So it was very much appreciated. Let's now turn to FASB and talk about a couple of things at FASB. First, we are going to be having a leadership change with a chairmanship moving from Russ Golden to Rich Jones. Second, as you very well know, there's been a lot of significant accounting implementation or accounting changes going on over the past several years, whether it's leases or revenue recognition, CECL. As FASB moves into the post-implementation phase of those standards, what do you think is important for FASB to be considered?
Sure. No, thanks, Julie. Great question. So first off, obviously, a very significant change happening at the FASB, where Russ Golden has been at the FASB in different roles for 16 years. So certainly a tip of the cap to everything that Russ has done, and a huge thank you for all of his different roles. We've greatly appreciated working with him. Obviously, wish him the best, and certainly thank him for his tireless years of service in a very, very challenging job. So that's the overriding part of the answer. And then, of course, we're delighted that Rich will be on board, and are very excited to begin working with Rich. Have no doubt that Rich will take over and do terrific things, and has a outstanding lens. And so we're really excited to work with Rich. In terms of the agenda, so as you mentioned, obviously there's been a number of different, very significant standards that have made big substantive progress on challenging issues, right? Getting leases on balance sheet, getting one standard for revenue, and then obviously CECL. All of those things have moved the ball significantly forward for investors. And so, from our lens, well, obviously where we focus on is there areas where accounting can be approved for investors. right? And so that's what we look at as we kind of think about what are good items for FASB to work on. FASB right now has a really good agenda. It's been terrific to see all the discussion on goodwill. There's certainly a lot of strong views, and people are certainly engaged, and that's terrific. Now is the time to be engaged. FASB is also working on debt equity. Debt equity, as folks know, is a very, very complicated area. Many restatements, many challenges when people issue, whatever instrument it is. And their focus in that area, I think, is outstanding. So certainly there's a lot of meat on the agenda. And from our lens, we'll look at it kind of with the investor focus. And then obviously Rich and the board will continue their fulfilling their mission in terms of the agenda.
Great, thank you. Sagar, as we wrap up our time today, do you have any final thoughts or key messages that you want to convey?
So just to those who've done the hard work of emphasizing financial reporting or preparing the financial reporting or being part of the being an auditor involved in the process, for those where we went through kind of the Q1 reporting to get to where we got, a huge thank you. That was absolutely critical for investors in a very challenging pandemic. And so accountants have been able to get through a lot of challenging things. Think about all the new standards that we talked about earlier, Julie, and over the history, if you look at the accounting profession, it has stepped up. So, obviously we're open for business. People come talk to us regularly. We will, of course, stay open for business. We will, of course, message, whether it's statements or other venues, the things that we're seeing, and then certainly believe strongly that we'll continue to have a very successful Q2 financial reporting season here, and I think that will very much kind of meet what our chair has said of trying to the thirst for investors' need for information, and so kind of meeting that thirst, if you will, is certainly our goal. So, but the overriding portion here is certainly a thank you.
Well, on that note, Sagar, thank you on behalf of the Center for Audit Quality for your time today. I'm sure our listeners are going to find this very informative, so thank you.